somebody tells people who are beginners, and I really wish somebody had told this to me, is that if you're watching this video, somebody who wants to make videos, right? And all of us who do creative work, like, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. Do you know what I mean? Like, you want to make TV because you love TV. You know what I mean? Because there's stuff that you just, love, okay? So you've got really good taste. And you get into this thing that I don't even know how to describe, but it's like there's a gap. That for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good, okay? It's not that great. It's really not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer. And your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? Like, you can tell that it's still sort of crappy. A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. And the thing I would just say to you with all my heart is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste. They could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short. And some of us can admit that to ourselves, and some of us are a little less able to admit that to ourselves. But we knew it didn't have this special thing that we wanted it to have. And the thing I would say to you is everybody goes through that. And for you to go through it, if you're going through it right now, if you're just getting out of that phase, or if you're just starting off and you're entering into that phase, you got to know it's totally normal. And the most important possible thing you could do is do a lot of work. Do a huge volume of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month you know you're going to finish one story.
This was, without a doubt, the worst writing advice I ever received in my entire 15 years as a writer. If you're new, welcome to my internet bedroom. And if you are returning, welcome back to my internet bedroom. I'm Rachel Moss, and I'm a full-time writer. And yeah, no shade to Ira Glass, but this is the actual worst piece of writing advice that I ever got. And what's crazy is it wasn't even the advice itself that was bad. It was the time at which I received the advice and what it meant to me and what it said to me about my value as a creative who is just starting out and the value of creating work at all. So I got this particular piece of advice when I was literally in an ivory tower situation. I was in my undergrad at the University of Chicago, and I had just gotten out of a really bad writing workshop. My writing mentor kept giving me C's. Everyone in the writing workshop was tearing up my work, and I felt lost and I didn't want to keep moving forward because I had this understanding of the fact that what I was doing was not good, and it wasn't good enough. It wasn't getting the grades that I needed. It wasn't, impressing my peers, all of that. And my writing mentor, he brought it up on YouTube and played it for me, and it got stuck in my head. So Ira Glass, for those of you who are unfamiliar, was and is the producer of the radio series This American Life, which back in the early 2000s was one of the first podcasts on the radio. It was on NPR, and it would tell these slice of life reported stories from all over the country, and people really loved it. And people were really obsessed with Ira Glass where I was because I was in Chicago at the time, and Ira Glass is a native Chicagoan. So I think what my writing mentor was trying to do was trying to be hey, Ira Glass was where you were and you'll be fine. But that is not how I took it at all. What I heard when he played me this clip was that my work sucked, and somehow I would just have to keep sucking until I became better. And that was very discouraging for 18-year-old Rach to hear. And I'm sure that some of you, whether you're a writer or an artist or another kind of creator, have received similar advice in the time that you've been working. And it kind of feels like the person who's giving you that advice is telling you that you suck. And that what you're doing is not good, but you have to keep doing it anyway. So if that is you, in this video, I'm going to talk about why that piece of advice really doesn't work and what I wish I had been told instead, or what I wish I heard instead, as someone who has had, now 15 years in the writing game. It's not that this advice is on its own bad or even like that misdirected. In fact, the basic equation that it's presenting makes a lot of sense. So you have your ideas, you see other people whose work you admire, and you have a particular craft that you want to get better at. So the idea is that you take all those elements and you add them to doing a lot of work over a period of time, and eventually you will make something that is good, right? But the issue here is that, especially when you're first starting out, those concepts of good and bad, and even the concept of good taste versus bad taste, are extremely abstract concepts. And the people who decide what is good or what is bad are usually outside of you, and so outside of you that they can't even articulate to you what makes something good or what makes something bad, right? It's like, well, I don't know why you think this is good and someone else thinks it's really bad. So what happened to me is I got this advice and it told me that I had to take what I was making, which was bad, and I had to figure out how to make that thing good. But I had no idea how to get from point A to point B because all I could really focus on was the idea that my work now was bad and I didn't have the proper tools to get it somewhere that was good. I didn't know what to do to make it better. And just making a lot of work seemed like a really big ask when I had no idea where it was that I was even trying to head in the first place. So instead of moving on to that second phase of I'm just going to make a bunch of work and learn my voice as I go, I got stuck in phase one, which is knowing that my work sucked and knowing that it wasn't what I wanted it to be. And I was stuck there for a number of years. I have notebooks filled with failed starts, short stories I didn't pursue, like beating myself up essentially for not knowing how to get myself into a better space with my creative practice. And here's the thing that I wish that someone had told me, and that is you can make good work or bad work at any point in your career. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you've been at this for 20 years. Seasoned professionals make bad work. And you've probably had this experience yourself. You really loved someone's movie that came out last year, and then you go and see their movie this year, and you're like, what was that? Like, I don't know what that was. I also had this experience recently. I read the new Emily Henry book, and I was like, oh no, this is not good by my standards. I didn't feel like it held together. And I had really loved the book that she came out with the year before called Funny Story. So, you know, this idea that we just become good and we stay good forever once we figured it out that's not how it works. I know myself, I am fully capable of making bad work. Sometimes I get tired. Sometimes my deadlines are coming too quick and I can't perform to the best of my abilities. Sometimes I'm trying something new and I don't really have the skill set yet to bring that thing into reality like I want it to be. Look at any other writer or artist or musician that you admire, and I can promise you they are not making bangers all the time. So what this advice inherently sets up is this idea that you start at the bottom and you're not good, and you eventually get to the top and you're good, when really it looks more like a wave. And it's like, yeah, some days like you show up and you're on the top of your game, and sometimes you're back at the bottom again. The idea is to embrace that so that you can deepen your practice, as opposed to like getting stuck where I did, which is at the bottom of the hill and looking up and being like, well, I'm never going to get there. So the idea that like when you start out, you're going to make work that is bad is inherently flawed, which I think is what makes this piece of advice pretty bad. It's funny that I'm judging it when the whole point of this video is not to judge. What I mean to say is this advice doesn't work, especially not for beginners. Beginners don't need to be told that they're just starting out. They already know that. I think it's a lot. It's a lot easier if you just embrace that and know that where you're going is going to have its ups and downs too. Okay, so chances are if you're watching this video and if you've made it this far, it's because you feel like you are stuck in some way in your creative practice. What you're doing right now is you're putting off making your art, writing your book, even starting to like make content or put stuff on the internet, you're holding yourself back from doing that because you're stuck in this safe zone where you're like, okay, if I can just like study enough, if I can learn enough, then I can optimize my process and I won't be bad ever. I will always be good, right? So here's what I needed to hear so that I can help you guys get on your way to making your stuff quicker as opposed to just staying in the sunken place, in the stuck place for creatives. Okay, so the first thing that I needed to hear was that it actually doesn't matter if you are good at something or bad at something. When you show up to do a creative act, you are solely there to learn. You've probably heard this in some form or another. A lot of writers will say that each time they write a new book, they are learning again how to write a book. And when you decide to be a creative or an artist or a writer, you're essentially signing up for an entire life where you're always going to be learning. So there isn't like a mountain to climb. Your only job as an artist or as a writer or as a creative is to show up in your creative space to do your creative work, willing to learn about that thing. And if you think about a time where you learned something, whether that was like how to fix a car or you learned a new language, when you started that process, you never asked yourself, am I good or bad at fixing this car? Or am I good or bad at learning this language? Because when we flip over to that learning mindset, it's like, no, I'm here to learn. I don't know everything. We kind of become a little bit more humble, unless you're like me and you feel deep shame about not knowing things. When we show up to learn, it's okay to not know everything. And if you can kind of show up with that mindset every time you go to write or every time you go to make something, you won't let yourself down because every time you show up to that process, you learn something new about it. For me, writing has always been a way of thinking. I really am not going to know what I think until I write it. I can plan as much as I want, but things always change when I'm in the process. And if I'm really rigid and unwilling to move with those changes, that means that I showed up thinking that I knew everything and I wasn't willing to learn. So if you commit to your creative process as a learning experience, you're not going to feel so much pressure to be perfect every single time you sit down to do something, and then it gets easier and easier to show up. Every time you think about being good or bad at your art, I want you to think about like the first day of Spanish class and yelling at yourself for not knowing how to conjugate all the verbs. Like that would be ridiculous, right? Or like if you showed up to fix a car and you had no skills, no tools, and you were just like, man, I can't fix this car. It's like, yeah, obviously you can't fix this car. You haven't learned how to yet, right? That's exactly what writing a book is like, or making a painting, any of it, honestly. So the second piece of advice that I needed to hear was to be disciplined about showing up, but playful in doing the actual work. The really tricky thing about creative work, no matter what kind of work you're doing, is that you need both boundaries and structure and also freedom. So it's hard to find the balance between those two things because sometimes we can get a little bit too rigorous in our approach to the creative act. And it's like, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. every day and I'm going to write 2,000 words every single day of the week. And you know where that gets you? Very tired and mad at yourself. We need a balance. We need freedom and structure. How I try to approach things is that, I am going to commit to a certain routine around my creative practice that ensures that I'm going to show up consistently. And I talk a little bit about how to set a routine in my video about Substack. So if you're interested in that, go check that video out, and I can make a whole video about routine and creative practice, but that's not this video. So find a routine that works for you and commit to showing up to it. But when you do show up, be playful in the work that you're doing. So imagine that you are like a clown. For example, this is how I think of myself often. There's a picture of me as a kid and I'm dressed in a little like clown suit, and that's always who I'm thinking about. That's like me. So Imagine that you are a clown, right? And you are part of a circus. Your job is to show up to circus night every night and make people laugh and have fun and maybe scare people, because some of us are afraid of clowns. And that's fine. But if you never show up, then you're not the clown for the day. Someone else is going to be the clown. So creative work is very similar. You kind of have to put yourself in a little bit of a loose structure. I'm the clown, I'm showing up for work at the circus, I'm doing it consistently, but when I go to work, I get to play. And someone recently on TikTok, I'll put their video in here, she actually said it way better than I did and without a lot of clown metaphor.
I wrote a novel while working full-time. It's coming out in the spring. A couple people have been asking me sort of like, how the F do you get started? I have some thoughts on this. I actually think this process basically applies to any art form. Okay, step one, you need to make this a bit between you and yourself. Like, you cannot take this seriously. The first phase of me writing my book was writing literally the worst book that I possibly could. And I don't mean like I tried to write a bad book so I could look back and realize I actually had an opportunity to be creative. I mean, like, I literally titled this book Songs People Sing because I think that is the dumbest name ever. Okay, so this is literally just about rigor. You're just practicing rigor. Like, this is a training wheel situation. No matter what you're trying to achieve with your art, the purpose, you just like really need to figure out how to be consistent and show up for yourself. And I think like the biggest issue that makes people not be creative is they hate themselves when they make things because they're judging themselves, or they either have not enough structure around it because they think creativity will just like come upon them and strike them, and then that's literally doesn't happen to anybody, or life gets in the way. So this is my foolproof method for sort of like creating rigor for yourself. It's basically like, one, create consistency. Two, make it a bit with yourself. That is the only way.
This is a really good way to balance the rigor of creative practice with how playful you have to be to actually be a creative. Here's the last thing, and this is actually like the most important thing. So everyone who dropped off, they're not going to get the magic. This is the real magic. The last thing that you really need to keep in mind is that being bad at something is actually really good. So I know this sounds counterintuitive, and I promise you I'm going to try to make it make sense. Let's think about this from a storytelling perspective. If you think about all the books that you love, the movies that you love, the TV shows you keep coming back to, the video games you play again and again, in none of those stories are the characters free of problems. You never have a story where absolutely nothing goes wrong. In fact, some of the best stories are where it's like everything is going wrong. Everyone is making mistakes. Everyone is screwing up in some way. I have never experienced a good story that is completely free of problems, where everything is just easygoing and nice. And why don't we want to read or watch or listen to or experience stories where everything is just good? Because that is really, really boring. So the goal is not to become a good writer. And when I figured this out, I was like, oh, okay, I can do this for real now. The goal is to become you as a writer. So everything that makes you flawed, makes you feel like, you know, all of your screw ups, all of your mistakes, all the things that like embarrassed you or you wish you hadn't done, if you can take all of those experiences and translate them into your writing, that's what makes you a writer. It's not about being a good writer. It's about being yourself as a writer. Because when you're willing to embrace the things that are not so great about you, or the bad parts of something, or your flaws, like maybe you don't know how to use a comma, or maybe you need to like learn how to tell a story, learn plot. I don't know. All of these like things that you perceive as flaws can actually be used to connect with other readers in a really powerful way. Because the struggles that you experience and the things that you look at and you say, oh, I wish I was different. I wish that I was better at this. I wish that I wasn't this way. Things seem so easy for this person. That's the material that other people are going to relate to, because chances are they're experiencing those very same things too. And honestly, once you get comfortable with what makes you a bad writer or a bad artist or whatever, that's the moment when you're actually ready to start telling a story, because you're not boring anymore. You're ready to make a painting, you're ready to make a novel, you're ready to make a zine, when you can accept that, yeah, you're a bad artist or you're a bad writer. That's what makes you ready to make your art. Good is always based on someone else's standards. And just embraced being myself, which sometimes, I put out work that I don't think is the best. Honestly, all the essays that I've published on Substack, there's always that moment for me of hesitation where I'm like, oh, I could have done this better. This is not good writing. This is bad. But I put it out anyway, even though that little voice is in the back of my head, because I know that the thing that is flawed about it is what's going to make it valuable to other people. And I truly believe that our flaws and our mistakes and the things that we look at in ourselves and say, oh, I'm not good at that, that's what makes us human, and that's what makes us artists. And that's why we're not ChatGPT or AI, which I'm not even going to talk about because that's a whole other video. But yeah, once you figure out that being bad is okay, you can do anything, essentially. That's like my little... Yay! We can put a rainbow above my head and be like, once you figure out you're bad, you're good. Okay, this was actually so fun. I love talking about writing, and I didn't want to do like another Substack how-to video. I was like, let's just talk about like writing and mindset and stuff like that. Because I think that's what you guys really liked about that Substack video. But yeah, let me know, what is the worst piece of writing advice that you have ever received? Please put it in the comments, because I love bad writing advice. And maybe I'll make a short video talking about how we can use some of those pieces of bad writing advice to our advantage. Because I really think that like the key is to take something where you're like, oh, this makes me feel really bad, and to turn it into something that makes you feel good. So yeah, leave those in the comments. And if you want to read more of my writing or see my zines, you can go subscribe to my Substack, which is called Internet Bedroom. I dropped an essay last week that is about bad art and the value of bad art. So this is a really timely video for that. If you liked this, you can go read that essay. You can also find me on Instagram at Girl Gutters and at Rach Writes. Rach Writes is more of like my business account, but I am doing a 90-day sprint over there to grow my business in public because it scares me. And I want to show other creatives that it doesn't have to be scary to promote your creative business online. It doesn't make you less of an artist. So I'm doing that over there if you guys want to follow along. But yeah, I can't wait to hear all the bad writing advice you guys have received, and I will see you next time. Bye guys.